Today I'm going to take a look at the recently released Solus 4.1, codenamed Fortitude. I'm going to take a look at Solus 4.1, the Budgie edition. Now this was just released a couple of days ago. Solus 4.1 Fortitude release on January 25th, 2020. Reading a little bit from the release announcement, all the editions of Solus 4.1 are going to feature the latest Firefox, LibreOffice, and Thunderbird. All of them are going to come with a nice suite of default applications. It will vary, of course, depending on the desktop environment, which edition you choose. They offer Budgie editions. They also offer editions with the GNOME desktop environment, the Mate desktop environment, and with KDE Plasma. Going a little deeper, looking under the hood, now you have better support for some of the newer AMD Radeon RX graphics cards, including the 5700 and the 5700 XT. You have the newer AMD Ryzen 3rd generation processor support for the Ryzen 3600 and 3900X. You have support for Intel Comet Lake and Ice Lake CPUs, and support for NVIDIA GPUs, including the RTX 2080 Ti, those of you that can afford that particular graphics card. It only costs about as much as a down payment on a house. Some other features you may be interested in is Solus 4.1 is the first ISO they've released using the Z standard compression for their Squash FS images. Now this is not something you have to worry about after you get Solus installed, but what this does is by switching to this Z standard compression, it actually makes Solus install quite a bit faster. And I have already done 2 installs of Solus. I have installed Solus on 2 of my laptops, including this Lenovo ThinkPad. This is running Solus 4.1 Budgie. I also installed Solus 4.1 Budgie on my Toshiba satellite. Both of them installed in under 10 minutes. Both of them worked. Everything worked out of the box. Wi-Fi worked. I was able to pull up a terminal and with EOPKG, their package manager, install a few basic programs that weren't installed by default, but were some things that I needed. All in all, it was a very easy install on physical hardware. I will run through the installation process in a virtual machine here so I can capture the installation process on camera for those of you that haven't seen the Solus installer before. Let me switch over to my desktop, and again, I've got a virtual machine loaded up here so I can record the install process for you guys. Now, the installer for Solus, they make it very easy to find the installer. It's the very first icon right here in the panel. So you just click that, and it says Install Solus. Choose a language. I'm going to choose English US, and then it wants to know, can it automatically detect my location? I'm not going to bother with that. English US has been selected for the keyboard layout. That's correct for me. Choose my time zone. I'll just manually pick a time zone. I'll choose the central time zone in the US. Now it's asking me about our drives. Should I allow Solus to automatically partition the drive, or do I want to manually partition the drive? I'll let it run through the automatic partitioning. Do I want to use LVM, which is Logical Volume Management? I don't. Configure the bootloader. You do need to actually install a bootloader, of course. So what name should this computer use on the network? I'm going to call this DT-VBox. And install the bootloader to /dev/SDA. It's already figured that out, which is correct. And we need to create our username. I'm going to call my username DT. My real name is DT. My password, let's create a strong and complicated password for the DT user. It's asking me, should this user have administrative capabilities, root privileges, sudo privileges. It's already ticked on by default. You probably want that ticked on. And then I just need to click Add Now. But I can't, because apparently it did not like my super complicated and secure password. I actually have to choose a better password. I don't know why, but we'll give it a more substantial password. Looks like it wants 6 characters at least. I chose a password with 7 characters just to be on the safe side. And now it's asking, do I want to add the DT user? Yeah. Just click Next. Then, do we want to review these options? These are some of the things we've already done. Language region, create our user, where we installing the bootloader. Just click Install. Click OK. It's going to format the drive right to the disk. This part of the installation should take maybe 10 minutes. 5 to 10 minutes is probably what it will take on my machine here. Good Lord, that installation was fast. That was a 3-minute install, guys. That installation was over like that. That was crazy. Now, I'm doing this in a VM, but my host machine has a Threadripper. It's a pretty beefy machine, 64 gigs of RAM and all that. But the laptops, I told you, it only took maybe 10 minutes on my Lenovo ThinkPad, my Toshiba Satellite. I installed Solus 4.1 on both of those, and those are far from beefy machines. Those are budget laptops. With both of them have an AMD A8 processor, so it's nothing close to the Threadripper, but still, I'm just blown away by how quick that installed. Now, to finish the installation, we need to click the button here that says Restart Now, and that's what I'm going to do. And the reboot process was very quick, just a few seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds at the most here. And now let me remember my very complicated and secure password for this particular VM. And let's log in to the Budgie desktop. And this is Solus 4.1 Fortitude, the Budgie edition. For those of you that are not familiar with Solus or with the Budgie desktop environment in Solus, some first impressions, at least my first impressions every time I see it, is this is a really clean and refreshing look. I love the great wallpapers. They always have some really great landscape and nature wallpapers. And the colors of the Budgie desktop environment. You see the panel, how dark it is? I mean, it is basically black. You don't usually see people that do themes this dark. Usually their blacks are more of shades of gray and silver. They rarely go full black, but I love that the Budgie desktop actually includes a proper dark theme. I mean, the menus and everything, the GTK theme, this is a very dark theme, and dark themes are much easier on your eyes. I don't understand why so many Linux distributions still ship with light themes for the most part out of the box. Not everybody has figured out that dark themes are really preferred by most of us, and I mean, you even see it with some of the big proprietary operating systems now. Mac OS was really touting the fact that they now offer a dark theme. Those of you that have used Budgie, the desktop environment, in the past, some of the improvements, it's no major changes to the Budgie desktop environment, but they did fix some bugs. Sometimes you would have some artifacting going on in the menus and things, and they've corrected some of those problems. Also, they did fix the way things are sorted within the menus in Budgie, because if you use especially languages other than English that include some special letters other than your typical A through Z, maybe you use some of the funky letters where, it's like a A or an E or something, but it has an accent on it. Budgie really didn't know how to sort those. It treated those as non-letters, special characters, and it would typically sort those at the end of a menu system, and most people would expect like an A with an accent on it to actually be sorted near the top of the list because that's where the A's are, and people complained about it, of course, to the Budgie team, and they were quick to fix this problem. Another change that the Budgie team is touting is the fact that workspaces, now you can set a fixed number of workspaces, so it's not a variable number of workspaces anymore. I kind of like that. That's typically my kind of workflow, as I'll set my workspaces to a specific number, whether it's 4 workspaces, 6 workspaces, or whatever. That way I know exactly the number of workspaces I always have, the programs that I always put on those workspaces. Now let's take a look at what is installed by default here in Solus 4.1 Budgie. So let's go through the menu system and let's go by category. Under accessories, we have the calculator. I believe this is just your standard GNOME calculator. Budgie typically uses most of the GNOME utilities. Budgie is not really a fork of GNOME, but it's kind of its own re-implementation of maybe what GNOME 3 probably should have been from the beginning. Also, under accessories, we have files. Of course, this is Nautilus, the standard GNOME file manager. Nautilus is a very attractive file manager. Some of the complaints with Nautilus, why it's often not used, especially unless you're using the GNOME desktop environment, is Nautilus is a little slow compared to many of the other file managers out there in Linux, especially if you're viewing a very large directory. The other problems with Nautilus in recent months and years is the fact that the GNOME team seems to be removing a lot of features from Nautilus. They're kind of stripping out a lot of the extra functionality that was there in previous versions. Also under accessories, we have our password and keys and text editor. I'm sure that's gedit, the GNOME text editor. Password and keys, by the way. If I go and choose About, Password, and Keys, this is Seahorse 3.34.1. That's one of the standard GNOME utilities. Under graphics, we don't have much here. Our document viewer, for viewing PDFs and such. We have LibreOffice Draw and GNOME Photos. Under Internet, of course, we have Firefox as our default browser. And this should be the latest Firefox. I believe it's version 72. Actually, took a second to load Firefox there. It wasn't very quick to load, but again, this is a VM. Yeah, this is Firefox 72.0.2 64-bit. You've got the browser, meet the rest of Firefox. That's a nice little welcome screen on the latest edition of Firefox. Also under Internet, we have HexChat for our IRC chat client, and I don't know if it will automatically connect us to like a Solus support channel. Let's see. It would be kind of cool if it did. And it looks like it's by default it's going to join the HexChat channel instead of like an official Solus support IRC channel. It is a nice touch when Linux distros have their IRC clients already set to automatically connect to their support channels. The only other thing under the Internet category is Thunderbird for our email client. For Office, we have the GNOME calendar, and then we have just a couple of the applications from the LibreOffice suite, but the important ones. We have Calc, Impress, and Writer. Calc is our spreadsheet, Impress is the presentation, and Writer, of course, is the word processor. If I open up LibreOffice Writer here, and let's close the tip, and I'm going to go to the menu, go to About LibreOffice. This is LibreOffice 6.3.4.2.0. And I do kind of like the dark theme here inside LibreOffice. Sometimes these dark themes, I think one of the reasons a lot of distros still kind of shy away from using the dark themes is sometimes it doesn't look good in every application, especially in applications that use a lot of text fields, form fields. Sometimes those can look pretty bad. Under sound and video, we have GNOME MPV for our movie player, just your standard movie player. And also we have Rhythmbox Music Player. Rhythmbox is one of the best pieces of software actually as far as the GNOME software suite. Rhythmbox is a very full-featured audio player. Allows you to, of course, listen to your local music library, and it does do some streaming as well. And that is it for pretty much the applications installed by default, other than, of course, the system settings and the system tools applications. The system settings is basically the pieces of software that are in your control panel. So if I, wanted to change the background or Bluetooth settings, display settings, things like that, of course, you would find that in the system settings menu here. Under system tools, really not that much under system tools. We have the terminal, of course, and we have gparted still here, and the Budgie desktop settings. And here is where you would change some of what you do on your desktop as far as the styling of the desktop. For example, the theme. It looks like the theme is Plata Noir, which is this very dark theme, and quite frankly, I love it. I wouldn't change that at all. The icon set is the Papyrus icon set, a very popular icon set here in Linux, and it's very attractive. I probably wouldn't change that either. You have options to change the cursor. You have the options to change where the notifications pop up. Top right is by default where your notifications should appear, but if you wanted to put it in a different location, you do have that option. Under the desktop tab, you can choose whether you want to see desktop icons and which desktop icons. For example, I can turn them all on and get the home icon, the network server icon, the trash icon, but I'm not a desktop icon kind of guy, so I will turn that off. The number of workspaces, virtual desktops, is set by default to 4, but you could increase that. I can make it 6, or I could decrease it to 2, whatever I want to use. In the Raven tab, you can choose some settings for the Raven menu. Now, the Raven menu is this little symbol at the bottom right. If I click it, we have a menu system that pops up on the right side of the screen, and it has some applets that are populated in the list, as well as your notifications would also be listed here. Right now, we don't have any unread notifications. And close that. For those of you that would prefer having a panel at the top rather than the bottom, you could click on the panel here, and you could adjust what widgets are shown in the panel, what order they're shown in, the location of the panel. Me personally, I typically, if I'm going to run a panel, I run one panel, And I really don't care whether it's at the top or the bottom, so I'm fine with it at the bottom. But those of you that prefer maybe the Ubuntu Budgie style of desktop where they have a panel but it's at the top, it's easy enough to move the bar to the top. And if you wanted to, Ubuntu Budgie style, if you wanted to add a dock to the bottom or to the left, you could always install the plank dock. I think that's what Ubuntu Budgie uses, and just add that to the desktop as well if you prefer that look. One of the complaints I've always had with Solus, and I have very few complaints with Solus because I think it's a fantastic project, but Control-Alt-T does not give me a terminal. I kind of like having that set in every Linux distro because I never have to worry about what distro, what desktop environment. I think everybody should just make Control-Alt-T a standard for bringing up a terminal, because I wanted to bring up the terminal. Now I have to go look for it. Now I could just open the menu here and type term and just hit enter, and I get a terminal. And really what I wanted to do was check system resource usage. So I'm going to run htop. Htop is not installed. Well, let's do a eopkg. Now, eopkg is the package manager in Solus. Let me zoom in here. I'm going to do a eopkg install htop. Program terminated. You have to be root. Of course you have to be root to install and remove software. I knew that. Let's see if I remember my password, though. All right, and htop should be installed now. And RAM usage is rather respectable for a full desktop environment, 625 megs of RAM. And that's after I've been playing around a little bit. I've opened and closed, a couple of dozen programs here. 600 megs of RAM, that's pretty good. Let me quit out of htop. Let's run a uname-r and see what kernel we are running. We're running a very recent kernel, 5.4.12. One of the things I want to check while I have the terminal up is I'm going to run a eopkg space list-installed. And it's going to list everything that's installed on the system. Well, that was neat, but I really just wanted a count. So I'm going to pipe that into wc space -l. Now let's get a line count. 680 packages. That is rather light. That is not bloated at all, which I kind of already expected that. Going through the menu system, there really weren't that many packages installed here by default in Solus 4.1. I mean, you have just enough stuff to get some work done, but it's not like they threw just everything and the kitchen sink on that ISO. Now, one of the things I want to do immediately on my Solus installs is make a shortcut, a keyboard shortcut to launch the terminal. So if I type keyboard, if I spell keyboard correctly, keyboard shortcuts, yeah, right here. Awesome. And let's see if I can find a keyboard shortcut already for terminal. I don't see one, but I could add one, I'm sure. And I can click the plus symbol here, and I can create a new shortcut. We're going to name the shortcut terminal. Then it's going to ask what command Control-Alt-T should execute. It should execute GNOME-terminal because that's the terminal emulator that Solus installed by default. Of course, I could install another terminal emulator, such as URXVT or Xterm or whatever it is I wanted to run. And now that I've added that shortcut, let's see, Control-Alt-T. And my keyboard shortcut did launch the terminal. Let's close that. And of course, I can never check out a distro without checking out what kind of wallpapers are installed by default. So I'm going to choose Change Background. I right-click on the desktop and choose Change Background. And this utility lets you change the wallpaper, and it also lets you assign a wallpaper to the lock screen as well. The default wallpaper actually looks really, really good. I'm not sure if I would change the default wallpaper, but they have some other really nice wallpapers here as well. That is actually a really nice wallpaper because it is very minimalist, not a lot of colors, and it looks great against the dark theme. So I would run that one if you wanted something with a little more color. Here's one as well. Going through some of the ones, this is a very nice kind of minimalist kind of wallpaper as well. Not a lot going on with that. Some really neat wallpapers. I like this one with the leaf sitting on some pavement. Very, very cool. So that was just a quick look at Solus 4.1 Fortitude, the Budgie edition. I have run Solus a little bit in the past. I actually ran Solus on one of my laptops for about 3 or 4 months, about a year and a half ago, and I loved it. It works just fine with the Budgie desktop environment. It worked just fine on my laptop. I was very comfortable with Solus Budgie. I also installed Solus Budgie on my main production machine, not this particular computer, the one I had before. I ran it for about a month as my main production machine operating system, made videos while running Solus, and it just worked flawlessly. The only thing that keeps me from switching to Solus maybe for my main Linux distribution is, being an Arch user, I would probably miss the AUR, and the Solus repos are still kind of lacking. There is not as much software in the Solus repositories as, say, in the Arch repositories or the Debian repositories. That's really the only thing that kind of keeps me in the Arch and Debian world, rather than, trying to move on to some of these independent distros like Solus or even something like Void. But it's definitely a really cool Linux distribution. They do good work, and of course I'm going to keep following the project. Now, before I go, this show was made possible by Chris, DJ, Donnie, Dylan, George, Haplo, Nate, Corbinian, Lambda, Michael, Mitchell, Rob, Sean, Stallman, and Willie. These guys are the producers of the show. Without these guys, this episode about Solus 4.1 Fortitude, this wouldn't have been possible. The show was also brought to you by all those other names you see on the screen. All those guys help support my work over on Patreon. If you'd like to support the channel, consider doing so. You'll find me at DistroTube over on Patreon. All right, guys. Peace.